Dungeons have always been a huge staple in World of Warcraft. They were always my favorite thing to do back in the day when I was doing a bunch of questing and the quests would lead up to the dungeon, or even just going and finding new dungeons for the first time. It was my favorite thing to do. But today, I want to start ranking all the dungeons in the game. Now, there's a lot of dungeons in the game, so I'm going to rank them by expansion. So we're going to start with vanilla or classic or whatever you want to call it. But classic also has the most amount of dungeons. But classic was the first time they made dungeons for World of Warcraft, so these have the most unique ones, and there wasn't a set formula for dungeons like there is today, so they were more fun and grand, and the developers didn't even know if people were even going to want to do them. They definitely didn't think people were going to grind them to level. So I made my ranking list of ranking every single classic dungeon from the worst one to the best one. Now, there is some criteria to my ranking a little bit, okay? I keep in mind bosses, the lore behind the place, the mechanics, the loot a little bit. And also, this is a big one right here, all right? Anybody in the comments who doesn't like my rankings, just know this is the biggest factor, my opinion, okay? So everything in this is my opinion. Nothing's objective. I mean, I think they are, but that's just me. And some of the dungeons that are like a bunch of dungeons in the same place, I kind of combined a little bit. Not all of them, but some of them. And I got it down to 19 dungeons total. So let's start with the worst dungeon, number 19. The Stockades. All right, if you're a true player and you play on the Horde, you don't even do the Stockades. But let's say you do play Alliance and you want to do the Stockades. This place, it sucks, okay? It is the worst dungeon in the game. It is just a jail cell. There's no spectacle to it. There's no cool bosses. There's not even good loot, I don't think. And now this dungeon was made slightly more interesting in retail with Hoggery than being a boss in the place. But is it just me, or is he really small? Like, this guy's supposed to be the boss, and he's the same size as all the other gnolls. And at number 18, right above the Stockades, we have the Horde equivalent, Ragefire Chasm. This is pretty much the same thing as the Stockades, but for Horde. Alliance doesn't really do it because you have to go into Orgrimmar for it, so it's kind of our thing. But I do think that this place is much better than the Stockades because the chasm or the cavern or whatever it is a lot cooler of a place than just some jail cells. There is a little bit of spectacle to the Ragefire Chasm. That's a word I'm going to use a lot in this video, by the way. Just the environment of this dungeon is something you haven't seen up until this point when you're playing it. Now, there is a lot of trash and not that many cool enemies, but there is that Felguard boss, and he's pretty cool. Right in the middle, I'd say that one's a pretty cool boss if you ask me. So that makes it rank above the Stockades, but it's not that much better. And at number 17, we have Gnomeregan. For me, Gnomeregan is really kind of cool in theory, but man, this dungeon is kind of rough, okay? This is one of the most confusing dungeons in the game. If it's your entire group's first time in there, you are going to get lost, okay? Classic WoW, there's no map. You have the mini-map, but that's it. And this place is confusing. There's a bunch of different scenarios in it that happen and events. Some of them are cool, but you're probably not even going to do them all because you're going to get lost trying to just find the way to the last boss. A lot of the enemies here are also really dangerous because there's lots of them and they're patrolling all over the place. Especially if you're a lower level going in here, you're going to have a bad time. This dungeon was a great hotspot for death clips on the hardcore server. I much enjoyed watching those. Number 16, Razorfen Kraul. Okay, I'm going to put my bias out there right now. I hate Quillboars, okay? I hate Quillboars so much, I wanted to put these dungeons at the bottom, but I'll put the bias aside because these are probably better than the ones before it. There's 2 of these Quillboar dungeons, and I think Razorfen Kraul is the worst of the 2. It's very hard to navigate this place with no map, and you'll get lost very easily. And the only redeeming quality of this dungeon is that it feels like you're breaking into the home of these ugly freaks and just murdering them all. Number 15, we got Blackfathom Deeps. Now, I don't think that this is a bad dungeon at all. And honestly, I feel like in all my years of World of Warcraft, this might be the dungeon I have done the most. Because if you're leveling up a character, you're always doing this in the 20 range, and they've made it re-relevant again with Season of Discovery, so I did it a bunch of times again recently. And I really thought the Season of Discovery raid version of this place was really a fantastic raid, but we're not ranking that. We're ranking the vanilla WoW version of this. And the vanilla WoW version of this dungeon, it's all right. It's kind of just a large underwater cave with some bosses in it. It's nothing too special though. Number 14 is Uldaman. Now, I really want to like Uldaman more. I think it looks cool. The aesthetic of the place is dope. The Titan stuff at the end is cool, but the majority of this place is just a cave with a bunch of random enemies inside. And that's just like a majority of the dungeon. The cool stuff is like at the end, and there is the Lost Vikings inside, so I guess that is kind of cool. So it doesn't make it super bad, but I wish this dungeon was a little bit cooler. And at number 13, we have Razorfen Downs, the other Quillbore dungeon. Now, I still hate Quillbores, but this dungeon is a lot better than the other one, all right? You don't get lost as easily. It's just cooler in general. There's skeletons having a good time until we show up and ruin it. Then you spiral up this little mountain to kill a lich at the top, and it's cool. It's a spectacle. Number 12, the Wailing Caverns. Now, this place might not be this high for other people, but I love this place. This is one of the coziest dungeons, in my opinion. I love doing this dungeon. It's a little bit long, and in the classic version of this dungeon, you can get lost in the maze section of this place pretty easily, but there is a way to figure it out pretty easily too. I just have personally a lot of fond memories of running this dungeon multiple times over all the changes it's even made over the years, and I like this place a lot. I even made this song that's playing in the background while sitting in this dungeon one day. Number 11, Blackrock Spire. Now at this point, there's not really any bad dungeons left. I don't really have anything to complain about. There are so many good dungeons in vanilla, but for this entry, I'm combining UBRS and LBRS into just one, so it's lower and upper Blackrock Spire. And this place is cool. It's one of my favorites. The lore behind it's cool. You going into the mountain and you're fighting the Dark Horde. And this is a place that a lot of people go to in 10-man groups. And I think 10-man groups are so cool. It's part of the reason why I liked Blackfathom Deeps raid, because it was 10-man. And the 10-man raids in Classic, they just feel good. More people is always fun. Number 10, Scarlet Monastery. Now, Scarlet Monastery is one of the most iconic dungeons of vanilla WoW. And if we're combining all the wings together, this is probably one that I've done more than a lot of other dungeons as well. So I've spent my fair amount of time in Scarlet Monastery, leveling all the way from 30 to 40, farming all the loot, doing everything I needed to do here. And yes, for this spot on the ranking, I am combining all 4 of the dungeons. Now, I think Scarlet Monastery has some of the coolest lore, some of the coolest bosses in the game, and some of the best loot for the level. But I'll be honest, half of this place isn't the best. I don't like Graveyard at all, and Armory has Herod, who I think is the coolest boss in the entire Scarlet Monastery and one of the coolest bosses in the game. But the whole dungeon leading up to Herod is very long and repetitive of just hallways and hallways of Scarlets. Like, it makes sense, I guess. Like, there would probably be a lot of guards along the way to the boss guy in reality, right? But it is very long and tedious. But other than that, I do think the library and cathedral wings are pretty much perfect. They're great, especially Cathedral. And I think Scarlet Monastery ranks well right here in the middle. Number 9, Shadowfang Keep. Now, I wanted to make sure a couple early level dungeons were, up near the top, and Shadowfang Keep is one of my favorites. This place is great. I love the final battle here with Archmage Arugal. It feels epic when you're at an appropriate level, fighting off Worgans coming here to get certain pieces of loot. This is another dungeon that I've done so many times in my years of playing World of Warcraft. I especially love coming here to just kill every Worgan I see, because I need to get these furries out of here. Number 8, Maraudon. The first big chunk of this dungeon might be very long and very confusing with no map, but trust me, it is worth it, because when you get to the second half of this dungeon, when you start heading toward Princess, you get some of the most beautiful level design I have seen in this game, and it is so good, especially with like it just meshes well with the graphic style of the game, and especially how it looked back then on computers. Maraudon just looks amazing. And then when you make it to the end, you get the most beautiful woman in the game who wants you, but unfortunately, you have to kill her because she has loot that you want. And this place is also great because it's very useful. A lot of people use this dungeon to farm gold even at level 60. And the outside of this place is epic looking, and there's usually tons of like PvP battles inside between Horde and Alliance if they're just fighting to control the entrance for some reason. Number 7, Scholomance. When I was younger, by far the scariest place in the game was Scholomance. This school was taken over by undead and gives many players PTSD. But I love this place, especially some of the cool bosses in it, especially like the gargoyle boss who's got the entire view of the Plaguelands out that window. You can see Lake Daromir. It just looks cool because you can also see this place from outside of the dungeon too. So it's like, I don't know, I like when you can see places from the outside of the dungeon and then go and see them inside of the dungeon too. Is that weird? I don't know. And I think this dungeon overall just had a lot of cool bosses that was also paired together with cool boss rooms, which was cool because there was a lot of rooms in this place that were different and they had different bosses that complemented the rooms in some way, like Rattlegore. But Scholomance is one of the good ones. Number 6, Dire Maul. From just like an aesthetics or in how places looks, I think that this is one of the coolest looking dungeons in the game. It's a max level dungeon that came out after the launch of the game, so this place is pretty huge. People want to come here for lots of loot. There's lots of quests. I think there's like a reputation, and physically this place is like the size of a raid, so like it's huge. This place is massive, and it's also massive with tons of bosses and different wings, so people run this place in different ways. People also come here for world buffs so they can smash down other raids very easily, and there's just lots of cool stuff you can do here. There's cool events. There's one where you disguise yourself up as an ogre to convince the other ogres that your friends are actually your prisoners, and then you go and kill the king ogre and you become the new king of the ogres. Anyways, Dire Maul's great. Number 5, the Deadmines. Now I had to put at least one lower level dungeon in the top 5, and the Deadmines is just the best low level dungeon that there is. It's a great introduction. If you play as a human, you're getting the best first dungeon experience that you can get. The story behind this place with the Defias Brotherhood is good. It's dope. I like stories where you're like, wait a minute, who's really the bad guy here? I kind of believe in all sides in a way. And that feeling in the Deadmines when you first blast down that door with the cannon and you see the giant pirate ship from the Second War, and you have to fight your way up it to face Van Cleef at the top. And by the way, Van Cleef is like one of the coolest bosses in the game, and he's like a level 20 dungeon boss. Like, he's nothing in the grand scheme of things, but he's so cool. And I think Deadmines is just another one where everybody has fond memories, and there's just tons of fun stuff in it. There's even a boss with 3 phases in the first dungeon in the game. A 3-phase boss. The big goblin dude with the mecha. Number 4, Sunken Temple. Now this is one of the coolest dungeons just in the game. If you're questing in Swamp of Sorrows for the first time and you look across the lake and you just see this giant like altar looking building and you're like, whoa, what the hell is that thing over there? And then you're also like, whoa, why is there a dragon flying around that thing over there? And then eventually you get a party together and you go in there and you see that this place is massive. This place is massive and there's so much cool stuff. There's cool bosses. There's tons of loot here. And it also caused one of the funniest hardcore clips that I'd argue is one of the funniest WoW clips of all time. They also even remade this dungeon into a raid in Season of Discovery. And that guy from that clip right there, his dead body is there in the new raid. It's really cool. Shout out Guzu for also reacting to one of my videos one time. Number 3, Zul'Farrak. Now this is a dungeon that other people might not have this high up, and this one might be a little bit personal, but it's a personal favorite of mine. It is the first troll dungeon that they've made, and it does not disappoint. There is tons of cool events in this dungeon and tons of cool bosses, all right? I love the boss where he's in the cave, and you bring him out and he starts summoning alligators. There's tons of funny hardcore clips of people dying there. There's a witch doctor boss that's cool that has a bunch of graves around that summons like zombies and stuff. There's one where you got to get a gong from a quest line beforehand to summon a hydra named Gazrilla. And of course, there's the epic staircase event that everybody knows about where, you know, you help these prisoners out, but then all these trolls start running up the staircase and you gotta fight them off before you fight the bosses. This place is just great. I also really like the epic sword that you can get from here, from combining 2 swords that can drop from the place into one. And the sword's really cool, but I just wish it was a little bit better because it can be replaced pretty quickly with an upgrade. And also, just bonus points to this dungeon too, because it's an outside dungeon, so you can just ride your mount. Number 2, Stratholme. This place has the craziest lore behind it. Some of the most important lore in Warcraft history happened at this very place, and this dungeon is now just the aftermath of it. But, you know, there's still stuff going on in it to take care of it. It's not like it's completely abandoned. And this place is scary. It gets 10 out of 10 on the atmosphere ranking. They do everything good. The undead in this place are crazy. There's so much attention to detail in this place too, it doesn't make sense because all the buildings, they're all named as the shops that they used to be back in the day before the plague took over. And there's even ghosts of citizens who can't accept that they died and are still pretending like they're living at the city when it was still fine. And when you're sitting there and you're seeing this whole city burning down with all this stuff here and what these buildings used to be, you're just imagining this place as if it was like Stormwind or something. You're like, man, what was this place like back in the day? And then you kind of do get to see what it was like, because in the Wrath of the Lich King expansion, we got a dungeon called the Culling of Stratholme where we saw, you know, the lore moment happen, but, you know, you kind of get to explore the city a little bit while it looks like Stormwind, and the forest looks like Elwyn Forest and not like the Eastern Plaguelands like it is now. And also bonus points to this dungeon for being the only dungeon in Classic that drops a mount. And number 1, Blackrock Depths. If you've played a lot of Classic WoW, you probably already knew that this was going to be number 1. This is just the best dungeon. It is the biggest dungeon. I think it's bigger than any raid in the game as well. This place has 42 bosses, 41 quests, and has content spanning from level 48 all the way to level 60. This place has some of the coolest bosses in the game with some of the coolest designs, like the room in the Flamelash fight. There's the Ring of Law, there's the Lyceum, there's the final boss room, which is cool. There's tons of cool sights and views in this place. There's great loot, and there's even the entrance to Molten Core, the first raid, inside of the dungeon itself. But this place is also the only place where you can craft the legendary mace Sulfuras from Ragnaros. I do wish that this weapon was better too. It's a legendary. It should like last you all of vanilla, to be honest. This place is peak Warcraft design. Like, this is the fantasy I want. This is like all the cool shit that I want to see in the end game. And I kind of like mean that for everything in Blackrock Mountain. Blackrock Mountain is like the perfect place for dungeons and raids and like endgame content. Like, I think like phase 1 of endgame vanilla WoW is like really cool. And the only reason I could see people not liking this dungeon is because they're probably burnt out because they've done it too many times because of the amount of stuff and good loot to get in this place. Anyways, that was my ranking. If you don't agree with my ranking, guess what? That's okay. You can leave your ranking down below. I actually want you guys to leave your ranking down below. I want to know what you guys think is the best dungeons. Let me know down below. Comment Zug Zug if you made it to the end. And I'll see you guys in my next video doing the Burning Crusade dungeons.